Wow, love can build a bridge. Don't you think it's time? If you don't, just tune into the election. We need that bridge, and we're here to create that bridge, to be that bridge. So thank you for being here. What a beautiful group we have today, and what a joy it truly is on this Sunday where we talk about, it's the fifth Sunday in our 7-week fall study series based on the book by the Reverend Dr. Roger Teel, This Life is Joy. If you remember, we began the first week, this instant is love. And then the second week, this being is light. This world is consciousness. This idea is substance. And today we move to the fifth principle, which is this relationship is oneness. Is oneness. It's not sameness, it's not uniformity, but it is oneness. And understanding that powerful idea that this life and this relationship is oneness. I love the way he begins this chapter. He said, "It seems to me that to be alive in this world is to have said yes, yes, at a soul level to advanced placement studies in an upper level curriculum titled Growth and Becoming Through Relationships." Yeah. Have you ever ended one relationship and started another and found out they had the same problems the other one did? And then you eventually got the message from Ram Dass when he said, "Wherever you go, there you are." that relationships are the mirrors back to us. He talks about the first principle in relationships being oneness is that he said it eventually becomes apparent that all relationships, that every relationship we have is with everything and everyone. That this world is, it's like Chief Seattle said, that there's this great web of life. And the Hawaiians call it the aka connections, that we're always in connection with everything and everyone. He then said that a relationship works best when you're conscious of it and available to it. That's true. Relationships with another actually are designed to teach us about ourselves. Amen? Yeah, that every relationship is ultimately leading us back to our relationship with our essential self. And so then the paramount relationship becomes this relationship is oneness, a very deep understanding of that we are all one, and we are also unique and essential expressions of the one. Unity does not mandate uniformity, that the one life expresses itself in many different forms, just as we talked about with the rose. And we say that when we say namaste, that namaste means I behold the divinity, the divine spark in you. It's to see and behold in another who and what we are. In the Native American tradition, I don't know the word for it, but basically the greeting says, there you are, I see you. And the other person says, here I am. Isn't that beautiful? That there you are, I see you, and then here I am. And that's the goal with our relationships, is to allow every relationship to lead us back to the one. There's a story about a man who had problems in all of his relationships. And so he went and joined a monastery. And he asked the Zen teacher to help him. He needed to have some peace in his relationships. That everywhere he went, he seemed to wind up in communities of people that weren't nice. And so he wanted to find out how to find a nice community. So he went to the monastery. Well, he began to have problems there too. And so the head monk took him and said, I want you to go travel up into the hills until you find a cave, and you need to stay there. And while you are there, meditate on your oneness. I want you to sit and think about your oneness with the rock, oneness with the cave, your oneness with the tree, oneness with the sky. And when the day comes that you really feel that oneness, come back to us. So the man went up, and it took a while, day after day of meditating. And then finally he had this incredible epiphany, where in his time of meditation, he had that sense of oneness with all things. And he was so excited. He gathered this few things and began down the hill and headed back to the monastery. As he got into the town and in the crowded road and he was trying to make his way, it seems like every time he'd walk this way, the man in front of him stepped that way. And every time he'd walk this way, the man went that way. And he kept getting irritated. And finally, he pushed the man out of the way. He thought, oh, God. And so he headed back up to the cave again. And he said, enlightenment would be easy if people didn't get in my way. I literally read a book years ago that said management would be easy if it weren't for the people. You know, it's like that enlightenment would be easy if people didn't get in our way. Well, people, one another, and our relationship with ourselves is where we come to practice the truth of who we are. And if there has ever been a time in our world that there are some opposites screaming out that appear to be anything other than the holy image and likeness of God, it's really a call to be able to see someone acting out from perhaps their brokenness and yet being able to still hold them in their wholeness. That's what oneness is about. And when we can easily say, Lord, have mercy, that's true, and we're thinking of somebody else. But is it true about us? That there's still some healing within us too, that to realize we act out of our brokenness, it's like A Course in Miracles said, we're always either crying for love or being an expression and spark of love. That we live somewhere on that spectrum. And so that's what it is to really understand what it means to be in the spiritual discipline, the awareness of living in the awareness that there's a divine essence in all of life, and we're seeking to recognize the divine essence in all of life. I mentioned earlier, Chief Seattle talked about we're part of the one great web of life, and anything you do to the web, that you do to the whole of life, and therefore to yourself as well. It's sort of like we understand the idea of the ecosystem. You know, science is helping us realize that this is not just a mystical spiritual idea, but it's true that we have an impact on our earth, that we have an impact on people and plants and things. And so it becomes, when in the book of Genesis it said that we were to take dominion over the earth, it meant to be stewards, to be those respectful caretakers of all of life and all that is, that we've been charged with that. So to begin to feel that and to live from that awareness. In 2004, if you remember, in Sri Lanka and India, there was the big tsunami. Can you remember that? I had just graduated from seminary, was in my first church in Lawrence, Kansas, and I had a man who had a family in Sri Lanka. And so it really touched me deeply because he was just distraught for days before he heard from anyone. And you may remember that during that great tsunami that over 150,000 lives were lost. Well, the people that went to the area that began to help repair and restore started hearing something common. And it was so profound that National Geographic went and did some research, and there was an article published in National Geographic magazine about this. People said that approximately 1 hour before the tsunami hit, that elephants began to moan and shake and came loose and went up and ran off uphill. They said that rodents came out and went uphill, that nesting flamingos were seen getting up and going by, that even bats were reported during the daytime taking off and going up. That of the people that survived, many of them saw that exact same thing. And they found that in all the carcasses that were found, very, very few were animals. Now, what does that tell us? It tells us that there's an inner sense of connectedness, and that all of life is, if you're attuned, you see, they're attuned to an intelligence, and something within them was warning them naturally to go and to take precaution, to go up country, which is what they did. And so the same thing applies to us. We have the capacity to truly be attuned to oneness. And so oneness, yes, it's about understanding we're part of this great ecosystem of life, and it's even more. It's realizing that there is an essential divinity in all creation, and that we share that essential divinity. So to be in alignment with the awareness that there's one essential divinity that we all share, all creation, every creature, that's what it means to walk on the ground as it is holy ground, to really understand that we share that one essential divinity with all of life. How many of you have a sense and just know that that's true? That you can feel it. And have you noticed that on your spiritual journey, that the more you attune, the more sensitive you become to how you have an impact on everyone and everything around you? I think as that really begins to touch us and open us, then we begin to create a world that works for everyone. Then we begin to create what the master teachers called heaven on earth. It's to really understand that each and every being carries sacred light. When I lived in Hawaii, Maui, I really wanted to understand the culture, the language as much as possible, because in my opinion, a lot of the indigenous, shamanic, those spiritual traditions really had a core understanding of oneness. And there's something very powerful. And that's how the ancient Hawaiian like aloha is the recognition that I am a part of all that is, and all that is a part of me. Isn't that powerful? To live in that awareness. So in Hawaii, when a child is born, just like here we read our children's storybooks, there's certain things we may read them. Well, in the Hawaiian tradition, every child will be read the story that's called the Bowl of Light. They grow up understanding this. The story says that every child that is born with a bowl of light. And that our job is to remember this light, to tend this light, to see it in ourselves and to see it in everybody else, the bowl of light. And that if you know yourself and you know you have this bowl of light, that you can fly with the eagles and swim with the ocean and do all things you were created to do. Now, can you imagine being told that story over and over again as a child? And then the story goes on to say that as you begin to grow up and you have your bowl of light, something's going to happen one day, and you're going to be walking along and somebody's going to get in front of you and irritate you, and you get frustrated with them, and a stone gets dropped in your bowl. And then you run into that person who you know every time you see them, they just drop a stone in your bowl. And then you're like in the grocery store, and this is one of my pet, you're in the 10 lane, and then the person has 16 items, and so that gets under your skin, so there's another. And then there's just a big old fat rock for everything else that happens throughout the day. And so they teach the children that throughout the course of a day, you're going to collect some stones in your bowl of light. And at the end of every day, you have to huli your bowl. H-U-L-I means empty. That you would empty your bowl, that you take time to do your forgiveness work. You take time to recommit on your intentions. You take time to do whatever you need to do to empty your bowl so you start the day clean again with your bowl of light. Can you imagine if we did that practice every day in our life? What a powerful practice it would be, that each and every being carries the sacred light of life. I'm going to say it one more time and then ask you to say it with me. Each and every being carries the sacred light of life together. Each and every being carries the sacred light of life. In the Lakota language, there is no word for loneliness. Because in the Lakota tradition, they're taught that all are relatives, that the tree, that the lake, that the owl, that whatever it is, every being is a relative. And so there's no word for loneliness, because you are always in relation with your family, the one cosmic family. In the ancient shamanic tradition, and this still carries forward, there was the belief that there was only one illness and one cure. That no matter how the illness manifested itself, that we were here to be able to bring forth a healing. Maybe we brought this into life for the purpose of bringing forth the healing, but no matter the illness, that there was only one thing that was needed. There's one ailment and one remedy. And the one ailment was being separated, feeling a sense of disconnect from the source and from all of creation. And the one remedy, the one medicine, so to speak, is to remember your connection to all that is. and it's called One Spirit Medicine. Isn't that beautiful? That I truly believe our world is crying out for a huge dose of One Spirit medicine. And that we ourselves need to constantly, it's sort of like to hula your bowl, to empty the bowl. To go back to empty is to go back to that state of one power, one presence, one spirit. Is to bring yourself into alignment with the one spirit, to practice that one spirit medicine. And so when we find the essence of our connection to the whole, the part of us that resonates with the whole can be called your whole self. And that's powerful if you really get it. The awareness that resonates with the whole is the whole self. And so the goal is to be more attuned and to realize that all of life is sacred. There's a powerful story of another Hawaiian man. His name is Dr. Hugh Lynn Haleakala. If you ask this man what he would say to people, he would go up to you and say, "What is the goal of baseball?" And most people say, well, it's to win the game, or it's, whatever. He says, well, the goal of baseball is to keep your eye on the ball. And the reason that's important, he'd say, is because the goal in life is to keep your eye on divinity. To keep your eye on your divinity, to keep your eye on your brother, your sister's divinity, to keep your eye on the eagle, the rock, on everybody's divinity, to keep your eye on the divinity. This man practices an ancient Hawaiian practice called ho'oponopono. Ho'o, H-O'-O, sort of like uh-oh, but it's ho'o means to make. It means to make. Ho'o, say that with me. Ho'o. And then pono, P-O-N-O. If you've ever been to Hawaii, you've probably seen bumper stickers that say pono, P-O-N-O, because that means do what's right. It's the right thing, to set it right. And when you say it twice, it means really, really do what's right. So ho'oponopono means to make it right and to really, really make it right. And so to practice that, he reduces it to this. How do you practice this? It is to keep your eye on the divinity, on your essential divinity and the essential divinity in all people. There's a story, his story has been documented. All of this, you can look it up, has been documented as true. He was born in Hawaii. He has several degrees. Richard, would you come and prepare? He worked for 4 years as a psychologist at Hawaii State Hospital. He was assigned, they called him because of his reputation. He had worked with children most of his life, and there had always been remarkable healings. So they were asking him to come to work for this Hawaii State Hospital, and he did. It says he worked on the dangerous ward where they kept the criminally insane. Psychologists quit on a monthly basis. The staff called in sick a lot or simply quit. People would walk through that ward with their backs against the wall, afraid of being attacked by patients. It was not a pleasant place to live, work, or visit. Dr. Lynn agreed to have an office and to review the patient files, but he never actually met or saw a single patient in all 4 years. What he did, he sat with the patient's files one by one, and while he looked at those files, he practiced the ancient Hawaiian ho'oponopono, to see it right. That whatever he connected with, whatever he read, instead of seeing them as an expression of their brokenness, he stayed with that file until he could see them as an expression of their wholeness, one by one by one. After a few months, patients that had to be shackled were being allowed to walk freely. Others who had to be heavily medicated were giving off their medications. And those who had no chance of ever being released were being freed. Not only that, but the staff began to enjoy coming back to work. Absenteeism and turnover disappeared. The ward ended up with more staff than needed because the patients were being released and the staff were all now showing up to work. The change was so momentous, by the end of 4 years, they closed the ward. They shut down that ward. That's amazing. And he said, this is where the person who interviewed him said, this is where I had to ask the million-dollar question. What were you doing that caused such change? He said, the way I worked with those patients was not to work on them, but to work on my perception of them. To change what you experience, you must change how you experience. He began to see and to truly hold the truth that each and every being carries the sacred light of life. Each and every being carries the sacred light of life. Dr. Cynthia Andrews writes, each individual embodies and carries the sacred light of life. Each individual carries light forward in the experience of life to the best of her or his ability. That light must be honored in everyone, or it isn't honored in anyone. Ouch. That light must be honored in everyone, or it isn't honored in anyone. No matter how another person looks, no one else knows what they are working out, what they are here to experience, or what viewpoint they are giving for the whole. You can and should put boundaries around what behaviors are tolerable. You need to protect yourself and your loved ones from violent acts of another, and even separate those who would harm themselves or others. However, to deny that the sacred light of life lives within everyone is to deny the divine. Isn't that powerful? That the light must be honored in everyone in order for it to truly be honored in anyone. I believe that's what we're here to do. And I think you would agree with me that our world is crying out for this. We want to all know that we're loved and lovable, that in the midst of our cracks and our imperfection, that there's a light that is still shining through, that there's a bowl of light that can never be taken away. It can never be taken away. We may lose sight of it, but we can never lose it because it is all that we are. So the gift that we give to one another is creating this space and holding this for one another. So for the next closing piece of this, I was strongly guided this week that we were to experience a level of spiritual communion. Now I want you to know that in my ministry as a unity minister, I have never administered communion in a regular church service. I've done that at a special communion service, but never in a regular service. But I was undeniably guided to do this. And when I began to attune to why, it made perfect sense. Because a lot of people, when I mentioned communion, it was kind of funny. In the last service, some of the new members said I would have ran out the door when I saw the communion table if I wasn't joining today, and I was afraid you were going to make us do that in front of everybody. Then I was just going to leave quietly. But many people after the first service told me it was incredibly healing for them, because for some of you, communion may bring back an old ritual that for you was disempowering. For other people, it may bring back a memory that is warm and very empowering. For some people, it just may be a neutral feeling around it. Can you identify with one of those feelings? Yeah, that we're all on a different spectrum. Before Christ and the disciples, you see, what's called the Last Supper was really a common meal. In the Jewish community, part of the community was to share a meal together. So there was nothing uncommon about what was happening. So it was a common meal that was being shared. As a matter of fact, the word Eucharist in Greek just means to give thanks, thanksgiving. The word communion comes from community. At its essence, even before Christianity, communion has been shared. It's the shared essence within the humanity of life. It's honoring the shared essence within the humanity of life. In its origin, the spiritual community, the ones, is the guiding light behind every person, calling forth and helping bring out the divine light in each other. Isn't it going to be a powerful day when we attune to that once again as a whole? That every community, every neighborhood, every nation is considered a spiritual community that's the guiding light behind the individual, that nourishes and nurtures and calls forth the light. And when I'm having a down day and I forget it, you don't beat me up, but you remind me. You help me remember it. You carry me. I carry you until we remember it. And so the elements in communion, wine has long been associated with spirit. We're not serving wine today. We have organic grape juice, so you're in good hands. But the grapes, the wine, is symbolic of spirit. The bread, we have rice crackers, so anyone that's gluten-free, have no fears. We've got you covered here. So organic grape juice and rice crackers. I'm going to invite our ministers and prayer chaplains to come forward to help with this. And so what this means, it's symbolic across traditions. It's the spirit and the substance. You see, each of us are expressing the one spirit of life, and each of us are expressing the substance, that we are the substance and the spirit of life. And so as the ministers and the prayer chaplains begin to pass this around, I'm going to ask you to hold it so that we can share in this. There's something I want us to share together. If you feel called, if it's yours to participate in this sacred common union, realizing that there's one spirit expressing through all life, and that every substance is an expression of the one. So I invite you to go around and to share the bread and the juice. So just hold yours as it comes around. And I invite you to join me in the chorus of this song. Love can build a bridge between your heart and mine. Love can build a bridge. Don't you think it's time? Don't you think it's time? Love can build a bridge between your heart and